She stepped off that dusty stagecoach after 8 years of running, and the man she loved wouldn't even look at her. But here's what Clara didn't know. Those 12 love letters she'd poured her heart into, he never received a single one. Someone had stolen them. Someone close to him. For 8 years, she thought he'd abandoned her. For 8 years, he thought she'd forgotten him. 2 hearts breaking in silence, while the real villain watched from the shadows. Now she's back in a valley dying of drought with nothing but a crumbling house and a stubborn hope that somehow the truth will set them free. But can you rebuild love that's been buried under 8 years of lies? Can you save a ranch when the land itself is giving up? What you'll discover in this story: the devastating cost of assumptions, the redemptive power of truth, and why sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running and finally fight for what you love. If you believe second chances are worth fighting for, drop a broken heart in the comments. Like this video if you're ready for an emotional journey, and subscribe so you never miss a story that reminds you it's never too late to come home. The stagecoach groaned to a stop, kicking up a cloud of dust that refused to settle. Clara stared out at what was left of Sweetwater Valley. 8 years of drought had done their work. The mountains were still there, but everything else was withered and brown like an open wound on the land. The driver called down, his voice as dry as the dirt. "This is it, ma'am. You sure this is where you want to be?" Clara's eyes were fixed on a man across the street. He stood with his back to her, but she knew those broad shoulders. "I'm sure," she said, though the only thing she was sure of was that running away 8 years back had solved absolutely nothing. Her trunk hit the ground with a heavy thud. As she stepped down, the heat baked up through her boots. It was August, the time of year when hope goes to die. "Miss Whitfield." She turned to see Samuel Miller from the general store. He was older, his face creased with worry, but his eyes were still kind. "Mr. Miller?" she said, trying to smile. "Didn't figure we'd see you back here," he said, not unkindly. "Heard about your aunt. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Clara said, her gaze drifting back to the man who still hadn't turned around. "How bad is it, the drought?" Samuel looked where she was looking, and his face closed up. "It is the 3rd year with no real rain. We have lost half the herds. Some folks just packed up and left. The rest of us are too stubborn to quit." He paused. "And the coal ranch, well, Ethan is still there. That is all I can say for sure." Just then the man moved, and her breath caught in her throat. He was coiling a rope with a sureness she remembered from when they were kids. Ethan Cole. The boy who had taught her everything, who had looked at her like she was the sun and the moon the night before she left. "I need to get to my aunt's place," Clara said, her voice stronger than she felt. "The lawyer said it borders the Cole ranch." "It does," Samuel said, then hesitated. "Clara, you ought to know. Things are different now. Ethan is different." "We are all different," she said softly. 8 years is a long time." Samuel picked up her trunk. "Some things don't change, though. They just get buried." He carried the trunk toward a wagon and called out, "Ethan! Got somebody here needs a ride out to the old Whitfield property." The man across the street went completely still. Then, slow as a storm gathering, he turned. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, but nothing could have prepared her for his eyes. The boy she knew was gone. This man was all sharp edges and hard country, carved by sun and sorrow. His eyes held nothing but cold recognition, like she was a memory he had filed away and forgotten. "Miss Whitfield," his voice was low and rough. He tipped the brim of his hat, a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than a greeting. "Wasn't expecting you." The formality was a slap in the face. Miss Whitfield, as if he had not kissed her behind the schoolhouse, as if they were strangers. "I was not expected," Clara said, lifting her chin. Ethan's gaze flickered to her trunk. "That place ain't fit to live in. Hasn't been kept up. I will manage." "Will you?" He said it flat, like a fact. A fire sparked in her chest. I grew up here, Ethan. I know how to manage. You grew up here, he agreed, his voice like stone. And then you left. The words hung in the air between them. She could tell him why. She could tell him about her aunt's secret illness, about the letters she wrote that he never answered. But his eyes were empty, and the explanations felt heavy and useless after 8 years of silence. I did leave, she said, and now I am back. If you will not take me, I will find my own way. Ethan watched her for a long, hard moment. Something flickered deep in his eyes, there and gone. He turned to Samuel. Load her trunk. I will take her. He walked to his wagon without another word, his boots leaving prints in the dust that the wind was already trying to erase. We leave in 5 minutes, Samuel gave her a sorry look. He's not usually so... Well, maybe he is now. Like I said, things are different. It is fine, Clara said. I did not come back expecting a welcome party. Have you ever seen a place so thirsty it just gives up and dies? That's what it felt like coming home. I was staring at a valley that looked like a broken promise, and I knew right then this was about more than just land. It was about facing a past I tried to outrun. This story is about that fight, about a woman who came back to reclaim what was hers from land that had nothing left to give. It's a reminder that sometimes the only way forward is to go back and fix what you broke. The ride out of town was silent, but that quiet was louder than shouting. Ethan sat beside me on the wagon seat, stiff as a board. He gripped the reins, his eyes locked on the road, refusing to even look my way. The wagon wheels groaned over the ruts, kicking up dust that tasted like failure. All around us, the land was giving up. Fields that should have been green and full were just brown, cracked earth. The creek beds were nothing but pale scars on the landscape. Even the cows looked like ghosts, huddled in tiny patches of shade. This was worse than I remembered. This was a slow, painful surrender. I finally had to break the silence. How long has it been this bad? I asked. Ethan's jaw clenched. 3 years of not enough rain. This year, we've had hardly any at all. I heard some folks left, I said softly. The ones who could afford to, he answered, his voice flat. The rest of us just stay and watch everything we've built turn to dust. There was no pity in his voice, just a hard, simple fact. My aunt's property has water rights to Sweetwater Creek, I said, trying to hold on to one little piece of hope. It does, he said, and for the first time he glanced at me. His eyes were sharp, suspicious. Not much water left to have rights to, but there's some. Why? You planning on selling them? No, I said, meeting his hard stare. I'm planning on using them. For what? He scoffed. The house is barely standing, the barn's falling in, and that land hasn't seen a plow in 8 years. What exactly are you going to use water on? Whatever it takes, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Ethan let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded nothing like the boy I used to know. You've been gone a long time, Clara. Things don't just work out because you want them to. And he was right. I'd spent 8 years in Denver teaching school, living a life with running water and regular meals. A life far away from this kind of struggle etched deep into Ethan's face. But every one of those years, I felt like a part of me was missing, like I'd walked away from who I was supposed to be. You're right, I said, my voice quiet. I don't understand it all. But I do know what it feels like to watch something you love die while you do nothing. His hands tightened on the reins, his knuckles turning white. For a second I thought he might say something, anything. But the moment passed, and he just urged the horses on. We turned onto the overgrown track leading to my aunt's place. The house came into view first, leaning to one side like an old man tired of standing. The barn behind it looked even worse, its roof full of holes like a broken smile. But then I saw it. Beyond the ruin, I could see the thin silver ribbon of Sweetwater Creek. It was still there. Despite everything, it was still running. It was still alive. Ethan pulled the wagon to a halt in front of the rundown house. He sat there for a long moment, just staring at the wreck that was now my problem. "This is your last chance to change your mind," he said, his voice low. "Samuel would find you a room in town until you could head back to Denver." "I'm not going back," I told him, climbing down before he could help. I turned in the dust to face him. "This is my land, my family's land. Maybe I ran away once, but that doesn't mean I have to keep running forever." His eyes narrowed just a little. "Some things are worth running from, Clara. Sometimes leaving is the smartest thing a person can do." "Is that what you tell yourself?" I asked, the words hanging in the air between us. "That I made the smart choice?" His jaw worked, a muscle jumping under his skin. I held my breath, thinking maybe, just maybe, he would finally say something that mattered. But he didn't. Instead, he swung down from the wagon, grabbed my trunk like it weighed nothing, and hauled it onto the sagging porch. "The door is probably swollen shut," he said, all business again. "You'll need to check the windows and the roof." He was talking to me like I was a stranger he was paid to help. "Ethan, the water pump is around back," he said, setting the trunk down and turning away. "Creek water's probably safer, but the pump might work if you prime it. You'll need wood before dark. There should be an axe in the barn." "Ethan, please," I tried again. "I have cattle to check on." He was already walking back to the wagon, his shoulders set like stone. "Lock your doors at night." I couldn't let him leave like this. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," I called out. "I'm not asking for anything. Just admit that we knew each other once, that it meant something." He stopped. His back was to me, his hands clenched into tight fists. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. "We knew each other." And with that, he got in his wagon and drove away, leaving me alone with the ghosts in the dust. Hear it. He was right. We had known each other, but that was a lifetime ago. People change, and this hard valley had a way of changing folks. Lost did too. He finally looked at her, and the emptiness in his eyes just about stole the air from her lungs. "The boy you remember is long gone, Clara, and the girl I knew rode out of here 8 years ago and never once looked over her shoulder." "I did look back," she whispered. "I looked back every single day." "But you didn't come back," he said, his voice flat. "And that's the only thing that matters." He climbed onto his wagon, kicked off the brake, and drove away. Clara just stood there on the busted porch of her aunt's old place, watching him get smaller against the endless sun-scorched land. He shrank until he was just a speck, then a shadow, and then he was gone completely. The wind kicked up, hot and dry, tasting of dust. She turned and faced the house, with its broken windows and sagging door. It looked as tired as she felt. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe the smart thing to do was sell this patch of dirt and build a life somewhere folks still knew how to hope for rain. But Clara had spent 8 years being smart, living in other people's houses and raising other people's children. She was tired of being smart. She was done running. She was done running. Clara grabbed her trunk and marched it up to the house. The door was swollen shut, just like Ethan said it would be, but she put her shoulder into it and it groaned open. The air inside was stale and thick with dust, but the place was built solid. Her aunt had known how to build things to last. The single room was small but laid out with purpose. A bed frame sat in one corner, a table and 2 chairs near the cold stove. She crossed the room, her boots leaving tracks in the dust, and wrestled the window open. Fresh air and the last of the afternoon light poured in. She could do this. She had 2 good hands and a stubborn heart. The practical part of her mind, the part she'd sharpened in the city, started ticking off a list. Fix the roof, clean this mess, check the well. But underneath all that common sense, something else was stirring. It was the memory of Ethan's hands on the reins, scarred and capable. The way he'd said her name, like it was a fact he'd learned to forget. She knew it was true. The boy she knew was gone. She had known it 8 years ago when she'd left before sunrise, just so she would not have to look him in the eye. She knew it in every unanswered letter she had sent. But knowing a thing and seeing it face to face are 2 different animals. The Ethan she'd left behind could laugh from the belly and had hope shining in his eyes. The man who brought her out here was harder, weathered down by drought and loss, and too many years fighting a losing battle, and her leaving had been a part of that, another loss in a long line of them. Clara started unpacking as the sun dipped low, hanging her few dresses on some old nails she found in the wall. She found a broom and swept until her arms ached. Then she walked out to the creek. It was thinner than she remembered, barely 3 feet across, but the water ran clear and cold over the stones. It was still fighting. She knelt and dipped her hand in, the coldness a welcome shock. She sat on the bank for a long while, watching the water trickle downstream toward the coal ranch, toward the man who'd looked at her like she was a ghost. Common sense told her to leave him be, to focus on her own survival. But the part of her that was still 15 years old, the part that had never stopped loving that boy, whispered something else. Water always runs downhill. It always finds its way to something. And some long silences are just questions waiting for an answer. The first stars appeared, scattered across a sky so big and clear it made her feel tiny and endless all at once. She had forgotten what it felt like to be under a sky like this. She sat by that creek until it was full dark. When she finally stood up and walked back to the house, she felt something settle inside her. It was not peace, not yet. It was recognition. She was home. And home was broken and hurting, but it was still home. And she knew that somewhere downstream, a man who'd forgotten how to hope was sitting under these same stars. Clara lit an old oil lamp and set it in the window, a small yellow light pushing back against the enormous dark. Tomorrow, the real work would start. Tomorrow she would have to face all the hard realities. But tonight, she let herself admit the whole truth. She had come back for the land, yes, but she had also come back for him. The lamp flame flickered, but it held steady. The wind carried the smell of dust and the faint promise of water from the little creek that refused to die. Clara lay down on her aunt's old bed, too bone-tired to even change her clothes. Through the window, she could see more stars than she had seen in 8 long years of city living. They looked like promises somebody had forgotten to keep. She thought about the boy who taught her how to fish, and the man who had learned to live without dreams. And somewhere between regret and a flicker of hope, Clara closed her eyes and let the silence of the valley hold her. Tomorrow, she would start learning how to stay. The sun came up hot and mean, blasting through the uncovered window and hitting her right in the face. She woke up aching and confused with the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. Then, the smell hit her. Old wood and dust, the smell of a house that has been waiting too long. She was back. She sat up and pushed the hair out of her eyes. It was time to get to work. The next morning, the air was already thick with a heat that promised to suck the life out of everything. I put on an old work dress and went to face the day. The water pump fought me, just like Ethan said it would. It took 2 tries before it coughed up water the color of rust. I filled a bucket and carried it inside, my arms trembling. After washing up, I managed to get the old stove lit with kindling my aunt had left behind years ago. The coffee I made was bitter and strong, and it was the best thing I had ever tasted. I stood in the doorway, sipping that coffee and looking at what was mine. In the full light of day, it looked even worse. The barn wasn't just damaged, it was collapsing. The fences had gaps you could drive a truck through. Everywhere I looked, the ground was cracked and broken beneath a hard, cloudless sky. It was a picture of absolute defeat, but I could still hear the creek. It was a quiet sound, a little whisper of water moving over rocks, insisting that it was still there. And I knew right then that as long as that creek was running, so was I. Clara shut the door with more force than was called for and walked out into the Texas sun. To make a go of this place, she first had to take stock of the damage. She headed for the barn. The door hung crooked, and when she pulled it open, the smell of damp rot made her flinch. Inside, slivers of light cut through holes in the roof, lighting up what was left. A busted harness, some rusted tools, and a wagon wheel with most of its spokes gone. The whole structure groaned with the wind. Clara carefully sifted through the mess, saving what she could. The axe Ethan had mentioned was there, Its handle cracked, but the head still good. She found a hammer and a coffee can of rusty nails. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As she dragged the tools into the yard, she heard a horse approaching from the creek. Her heart jumped when she saw it was Ethan. He rode like he was born to it, his body moving with the horse in a way that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He had a canteen slung over his shoulder and a bundle tied behind him. When he spotted her standing there, covered in dust with an armful of rusty tools, an unreadable look crossed his face. He pulled up about 10 feet away, close enough to talk, but far enough to keep his distance. He tipped his hat in a way that felt more like a wall than a welcome. "Morning," he said. "Morning." Clara set down the tools, wiping her dusty hands on her skirt. "I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon. Wasn't planning on it." Ethan's eyes went past her to the sorry state of the barn, and she saw his jaw tighten. "I was checking my creek line and figured I ought to tell you something." "What's that?" He swung down from the horse, a move that felt like he was committing to a real conversation. He untied the canvas bundle from his saddle. "There's a fence between your land and mine," he said, not quite looking at her. "Used to be we both kept it up, but your aunt fell behind these last few years. It's mostly down now. My cattle have been wandering over." "Is that a problem?" "It is when I can't tell whose cow is whose. And it is when they're drinking from your creek. We need a clear boundary before it becomes a legal issue." Clara looked at him, at the careful space he kept between them. "You rode all the way over here just to talk about a fence line. It's important." "I'm sure it is," she said. "But that's not the real reason you're here." Ethan's eyes finally met hers, sharp and guarded. "You think you know why I'm here?" "No," Clara admitted. "But I know what a man looks like when he's carrying a weight he doesn't want to speak aloud." For just a second, his composure broke, and she saw the raw grief and anger underneath. Then he shut it down tight. "I brought you some things." He held out the bundle. "Beans, coffee, some jerky. Town's a long ride without a horse." Clara just stared at the bundle. "Why would you do that?" "Because this valley is hard enough without starving to death," he said flatly, as if 8 years of silence had never happened. "You can pay me back when you get to town. And I can help with that fence. Not for you," he added quickly. "For me. It's my cattle, so it's my problem to fix." He was lying, and she could see it. He was here because some part of him, a part he probably hated, just could not leave her to struggle all alone. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, I'm just solving my own problem." He turned, pulled work gloves from his saddlebag, and started walking toward the property line. "We'll start at the creek and work our way north. You got any wire cutters in that junk pile?" Clara set the bundle on the porch and hurried to catch up. "Ethan, wait." He kept walking. "What?" "You don't have to do this." "I know I don't. I'm choosing to." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you're punishing yourself for something." That made him stop. He turned, and the look in his eyes was so bleak it hurt her to see. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You've been gone 8 years, Clara. You don't get to come back and pretend you still know me." "You're right, I don't," she said, holding his gaze. "But I remember a man who couldn't tell a lie to save his soul. So either you've changed completely, or you're trying awful hard to make me think you have." Now, have you ever felt the sting of injustice, that deep-down hurt when you are wronged by someone you trust? This is a story about how a single lie buried for 8 long years nearly destroyed 2 people. It is a reminder that you have got to fight for the truth, no matter how long it takes. Ethan's hands balled up into tight fists. "What in the Sam Hill do you want from me, Clara?" he asked, his voice low and hard. "You want me to be glad you are back? Well, I am not. You want me to act like the last 8 years never happened? I cannot do it. You left me standing in the dust, wondering what I did wrong." The words hit her hard. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she would not look away. "You did not do anything wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "Then why did you leave me?" he demanded. My aunt was dying, she explained. She had nobody else. Ethan scoffed. And you could not send a letter? Not one word in all that time? I did send letters. The frustration of 8 years finally broke through. I sent a dozen letters that first year, Ethan. I poured my heart out to you, and you never answered. Not once. Ethan stood there frozen. I never got any letters from you, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Do not lie to me, Clara. Not about this. I am not lying, she insisted. I never got a single one. They just stared at each other. 8 years of silence. 8 years she believed he had just ignored her. 8 years of carrying that hurt like a stone in her heart. And now he was telling her he never got the letters at all. That is not possible, she whispered. Seems like it is, Ethan said, turning away from her. His shoulders were stiff with tension. Who did you send them to? He asked, his voice rough. To you, she said. Ethan Cole, Cole Ranch, Sweetwater Valley. And you are sure you mailed them? The question stung her. I mailed them, she said, her voice sharp. I walked them to the post office myself and paid for every last one. Ethan was quiet for a long time, just looking out at the creek. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she almost missed it. My father had a stroke the week after you left. He was laid up for 6 months before he passed. During that time, my stepmother handled everything, including the mail. A cold dread washed over Clara. She would not have, she breathed. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. She never liked you. Always said you were a distraction. She wanted me focused on the ranch to protect her investment? Yeah, she would have done that. Clara felt sick to her stomach. All those letters, all that heartache. She had spent years thinking he hated her, that she had done something so terrible he could not even write back. And he had never known. He had spent those same years thinking she had just abandoned him without a care in the world. Ethan, I am so sorry, she said. For what? It was not your fault, he replied, but his voice was hollow, scraped raw by a grief that was 8 years old but felt brand new. Neither of us knew, and now we do. It does not change the fact that you still left and I still stayed. 8 years is a long time. My father still died, and I learned how to get by without you. But it means you did not choose to ignore me, she pleaded, and I did not choose to abandon you. Maybe we did not choose it, he said, his voice cracking, but we lived it. And you cannot unlive 8 years, Clara. You cannot forget what it feels like to wake up every morning knowing the person you loved is just gone. That was it. Something inside Clara just broke. She closed the space between them and wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. For a second he was stiff as a board. Then he just folded. He held her back, his arms like steel bands bearing his face in her hair. She could feel him shaking. I am so sorry, she whispered into his chest. If I had known, I would have come back. I know, his voice was muffled. Or I would have come for you. We would have found a way. We still can, she said, looking up at him. His eyes were red, his face filled with a pain that made her own heart ache. Can we? He asked. I do not know how to let you back in, Clara. For 8 years I have taught myself that caring for someone just means losing them. Then we will figure it out together, she said, touching his face. He flinched, then leaned into her hand like a man starved for warmth. We will rebuild it, one fence post at a time. A small, broken smile touched his lips. That is a terrible metaphor. It is all I have got right now, she replied. Are you going to help me fix this fence or just make fun of my metaphors? This time the smile was real. I reckon I can do both, he said. They walked to the creek together. The sun was getting high and the air was hot and dry. The fence line was a mess. Posts were rotted, wire was rusted and snapped. In some places there was nothing left at all. Ethan looked it over with a grim expression. "We will need new posts, wire, tools," he said. "This is not a one-day job, Clara. This is weeks of work." "Then we will work for weeks," she declared. "I have my own ranch to run, cattle to tend, hay to cut." "Then what are you asking for?" Clara saw the walls going back up around him. She knew she had to tear them down. "I am asking if we can work together, share the load. You help me with things I do not know, and I help you with things that are easier with two people." "Like what?" he challenged. "What could you possibly help me with?" She could have been hurt by his tone, but instead she just gave him a sharp little smile. "I spent 8 years in Denver, Ethan. I learned accounting, how to manage inventory, how to negotiate with suppliers. I can read and write better than most men in this valley. So, unless your ranch is running perfectly, I would say I have got a lot to offer." He stared at her, and she could see something shift in his eyes. "You really think we could make this work? As partners?" "I think we stand a better chance together than we do apart," she said. He looked her right in the eye. "And what happens when you decide this valley is too hard and you want to leave again?" The question cut deep, but she held his gaze. "I am not leaving," she said, her voice firm. "I ran away once, and I have regretted it every single day since. I am done running. I am asking you to watch what I do, not listen to what I say. Judge me by my actions." Ethan took off his hat and wiped his brow, a clear stalling tactic. When he spoke again, his voice was low and careful. "If we do this, it's business. Just two neighbors with a shared problem. Not friendship, not what we used to be. Can you live with that?" The words stung more than she wanted to admit, but she understood. He was building his walls back up. "I can live with that," she said. "For now." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'll take what you're willing to offer. But I'm not giving up on us, Ethan. Not on what we could be if we weren't both so scared." "I'm not scared." "Liar." For a moment, a hint of a smile touched his eyes. "You always were too honest for your own good." "Someone has to be," she shot back. "You've gotten mighty good at pretending." "Not pretending, surviving," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Clara picked up a piece of rotted fence post. "Seems to me that surviving without actually living is just a slow way of dying." "That's a dark thing to say. I spent 8 years withering away in Denver. I know the look." Ethan just watched her for a spell, then went to his horse and brought back a canteen. "Drink," he said. "It's going to be a long one." When Clara took it, their fingers touched, and a jolt went right through her. He felt it, too, pulling his hand back quick and looking away. After she drank, he took a long swallow, his eyes on the broken fence. "We'll start with the posts. I've got cedar at my place I can bring over. You can help me set them." "All right." "We also need to settle up on water from the creek. Depends on if you're running cattle." "Not yet. Just making the house livable. Maybe later, once I get the lay of the land." He nodded. "That's sensible. More than I figured." "What did you figure?" "I don't know. That you would show up with some big city plan to fix everything you do not understand." Clara could not help but smile a little. "Oh, I have got plenty of plans. I am just not fool enough to try them yet." "That is a comfort," he admitted. "Did you really think I would be that much of a fool?" "No, but I have been trying not to think on you at all, and my mind just filled in the worst." His honesty caught her off guard. She saw then how tired he was, the weight of him holding this place together all by himself. "Ethan, why did you come back this morning?" He stayed quiet so long she figured he would not answer. Then, his voice low, he said, "I woke up knowing you were out here alone with nothing but trouble, and I just could not leave you to it, even with you being mad at me." He finally met her eyes. Seems 8 years of pretending not to care did not take. Her throat tightened. I am glad. Are you? He asked. Most days I wish it had. Liar. A real smile almost touched his lips. You are gonna keep on with that, aren't you? Till you stop. Maybe I am just lying to myself. Then you ought to stop that too. He shook his head, a softer look in his eyes. You make it all sound so simple. It is simple, just not easy. Nothing about us ever was. But we are here talking, and we are breathing. That is more than I had yesterday. He gave a firm nod. All right, then. Talk will not fix offense. Let's get to it. The morning was spent in the brutal sun, marking the line and clearing brush. The work was hard, and Clara's hands were raw inside the gloves he gave her. But there was a quiet rhythm to it, a slow mending between them as they worked side by side. He would show her what to do, then just let her be. By noon, the heat was a heavy blanket. They took a break by the creek, finding shade under a tough old cottonwood. Brought some food, Ethan said, handing her a parcel of bread, cheese, and jerky. Clara was too tired and hungry to care what it was. They ate in a comfortable silence. They sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the creek slide past their boots. Thank you, Ethan, she finally said, for all of it. He finished his bread before he spoke, staring at the water. Do not thank me yet. We got a long road ahead. But we are on it. That is better than standing still. He turned to her, his face serious in the shade. I am scared, Clara. Scared of letting you in again. Scared of what will happen when you see how hard this life really is. Scared of it all going to dust again. I am scared too, she said softly. But not as scared as I am of always wondering what if. Brave or foolish, he asked. Maybe they are the same thing. He reached out then, his rough hand gently tucking a stray piece of hair behind her ear. For a second, his fingers rested on her cheek, and the whole world went still. Then he pulled back. We ought to get back at it. And as they walked back to the fence, Clara felt a tiny seed of hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was there. They worked straight through the afternoon glare, a white-hot heat that made every breath a chore. When the last post was set solid in the ground, Ethan stepped back, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. That will do for today. Any more, and we will be making mistakes. Clara was too bone-tired to argue. Her hands ached, her shoulders burned, but looking back at the 20 new posts standing straight and true, she felt a powerful sense of pride. Tomorrow, then? She asked. He looked her over, a hard look in his eyes. You sure about that? It only gets harder from here. Your hands will be a mess, and you will wake up feeling like you have been trampled. Probably, she said. I am still sure. He watched her a good long while, like he was trying to see clear through her, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. He must have seen what he was looking for, because he gave a short nod. I'll be back at sunrise. We can get that wire stretched before the real heat sets in. He walked over to his horse, grabbed the reins, and got in the saddle like he was born there. Remember to lock your doors. You told me that yesterday. Well, it's still true today. He gave a little tip of his hat, a gesture that was polite but kept his distance, and pointed his horse for home. But then he stopped and looked back. Clara, he said, thank you, for not making this any harder than it had to be. Before she could answer, he was off, leaving her in a cloud of dust. She felt like he'd handed her something precious, but she couldn't rightly say what it was. Her legs trembled with exhaustion as she walked back to the house. Inside, the heat was suffocating. Clara shoved the windows open wider, hoping for a breeze, then fell onto the bed, too tired to even take off her clothes. She only meant to rest her eyes for a minute, but woke up later to a deep, rumbling thunder. Disoriented, she sat straight up, her heart pounding. Lightning tore across the dark sky in angry flashes. The air was thick, heavy with the promise of what this valley had been praying for. Rain. She scrambled to the door and threw it open. stepping onto the porch with her bare feet. The wind had come alive, whipping her hair across her face, carrying that sweet smell of wet dirt. Another bolt of lightning cracked so close she felt the thunder in her chest. Then the first drops fell, big and cold, hitting the thirsty ground like tiny blessings. Clara walked right out into the yard, turning her face to the sky. The rain soaked her dress and hair, washing away the grit and weariness of the day. It was a miracle. It was everything. And then she thought of Ethan's cattle, scattered out on the open range with fences down. She thought of the creek, how it could turn from a trickle into a raging torrent in a storm like this. Water could be a blessing, or it could be a disaster. Clara ran back inside, pulled on her boots, and grabbed the lantern. Her hands shook as she lit the wick, the small flame a defiant spark in the dark. She didn't know what she could possibly do, but she knew she couldn't just stand by and watch. She was halfway to the creek when she saw it. Another light, a lantern bobbing in the darkness. She heard a voice she knew anywhere, yelling at cattle that couldn't hear him over the storm. Clara changed course, splashing through the growing puddles, and nearly ran straight into Ethan beside her barn. "What in the world are you doing out here?" he yelled over the wind. "I was about to ask you the same thing. My cattle are about to bolt. I've got to." A crack of lightning hit so close it blinded her for a second. Ethan grabbed her arm and hauled her toward the barn. "Get inside before you get struck." They tumbled through the door just as he pulled it shut. The roar of the rain on the old roof was deafening, with water pouring through the holes. "You can't go back out there," Clara said, setting her lantern down. "It is not safe. I do not have a choice. If they stampede into that rising creek..." He did not have to finish. She knew what he meant. Ruin. The one thing that could break him for good. "Then I am helping you." "Absolutely not, you. You cannot do it alone. I have been doing everything alone for 3 years now, Clara. I can handle this." "Stop it." I stepped right up to him, close enough to see the rain drip off the brim of his hat and the fear hiding under all that pride. "Quit pretending you have to carry this whole world on your own. It is not a sign of failure to accept a little help. We are partners in this, remember? You said so yourself. Or does that only work when you are the one doing the saving?" I saw the muscle jump in Ethan's jaw. Thunder cracked so hard the old barn groaned, and a shower of rain started pouring through a brand-new hole in the roof. He finally looked at me, rain and lantern light shining in his eyes. Just for a second, something in him seemed to give. "You stay right with me. You do exactly what I tell you. If it gets too rough, you ride straight back here, you hear?" Agreed. "And Clara?" His hand, rough from work, but gentle as could be, touched my face. "If anything happens to you, I will never forgive myself. Then we will just have to make sure nothing happens to us." We rode out into that gale, Ethan on his gelding and me on an old mare. The wind howled and the rain blew sideways, so hard I could barely see a few feet ahead. Ethan hollered over the storm, telling me to head for the north pasture where the cattle were last seen. I urged my horse on, following his shadow through the downpour. The ground had turned to slick mud, and my mare stumbled twice. Every flash of lightning showed a world of fence posts and rock, then threw us back into the dark. We found the herd bunched up against a busted fence line, their eyes white with fear. They were packed together for safety, but one wrong move, and they would stampede, trampling everything in their path. "We have to push them south, away from the creek," Ethan yelled. "Just use your horse to nudge them along." I knew what to do. The feeling was buried deep, a memory in my muscles from a time when my father was still alive. I moved my mare to the edge of the herd and started to press them, using her weight and my voice to guide them. And bless it, it was working. The whole herd began to move slow and steady, away from the rising creek and toward higher ground. We were getting them clear. Then lightning hit a cottonwood tree not 50 yards away. The crack was deafening and the tree just exploded into a ball of fire. That was all it took. The herd panicked. They scattered and ran in every direction, blind with terror. My own mare reared up, screaming, and I barely held on. I wrestled her back under control and searched frantically for Ethan. He was right in the middle of the chaos, his horse spinning as he tried to turn the tide of cattle. I saw him lean, reach for something, and then his horse slipped. Ethan went down, disappearing into the mud and the pounding hooves. I did not even think. I spurred my mare forward, screaming his name, shoving cattle out of the way. A steer slammed into my leg, the pain sharp and sudden, but I kept pushing through the darkness. "Ethan, over here," he called out, his voice strained but strong. I found him getting to his feet, caked in mud with a cut bleeding over his eye. "Are you all right?" "I am fine, but we need to—" He stopped cold, his face turning pale as he stared past me. Clara. The creek. I turned, and my heart dropped. The little creek from this morning was now a raging monster. A brown torrent filled with debris, moving fast enough to sweep away anything. And the cattle, in their blind panic, were running straight for it. "If they hit that water, they will drown," Ethan said, swinging back into his saddle. "We have to turn them now." The two of us rode straight into that stampede, trying to turn 300 terrified animals with nothing but grit and a prayer. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Her throat felt like it was full of sand from all the hollering. Her hands were frozen stiff, locked onto the wet leather reins. But against all odds, it was working. The cattle herd was finally turning. Their blind panic was giving way to the instinct to survive. As the animals figured out they were being led away from the danger, they moved east, away from the flooding creek. They found their footing on higher, rockier ground. And just like that, the stampede was over. The cattle slowed to a stop, milling around as their fear turned into pure exhaustion. Clara sat on her horse, both of them trembling in the downpour, and a laugh bubbled up out of her. It was the sound of shock and disbelief. They had actually done it. Ethan rode up next to her, his face a mess of mud and blood, and he was laughing too. It was a wild, ragged sound, born not from humor but from pure, gut-wrenching relief. He looked at her, his eyes wide. "We are alive." "We sure are," she said. "That was the dumbest thing I have ever done." Clara managed a weak smile. "Oh, I think you have done dumber. Remember trying to ride that wild stallion when we were 16? I was trying to get you to notice me." "Did it work?" "Well, you cried when I broke my collarbone, so I would say yes." He reached over, his hand finding hers. He squeezed it tight. "Thank you. I could not have done this without you. I know." "I could. You are supposed to pretend you would have managed just fine." "I am too tired to lie to you." Clara squeezed his hand back. "You would have lost half the herd and likely gotten yourself killed trying to do that alone." He nodded. "Probably." "Clara?" he asked. "Yes. I'm glad you came back." Those words felt heavy and real, hanging in the air between them until a loud clap of thunder made them both jump. Ethan let go of her hand. "We better get inside before lightning finds us." They rode toward Clara's place as the rain softened into a steady shower. The worst of the storm was behind them. By the time they reached the barn, they were both shaking from cold and exhaustion. Inside, they dripped onto the dirt floor, just staring at each other. Clara's dress was soaked through. Ethan's shirt was torn, and they both had enough mud on them to plant a garden. The cut over his eye was still slowly bleeding. "You are hurt," Clara said, stepping toward him. "It is nothing. It is not nothing. Come on up to the house. I have got bandages." He just stood there. "Ethan," she said again, this time with a tone that meant business. He followed her to the house. Inside, her hands shook as she lit a lamp. Ethan looked lost, standing there in the dim light. She found her medical kit and pointed to a chair. "Sit down. I will get mud on everything. I do not care." "Sit." He sat. Clara poured some water into a bowl and grabbed a clean cloth. Standing in front of him, she could see just how worn out he was. The last few years had carved new lines into his face. She wet the cloth and gently touched his forehead. "This might sting a little. I have had worse." But he still flinched, his hands tightening on the arms of the chair. Clara cleaned the wound carefully. The gash was ugly, but it was not too deep. "That is going to leave a scar. It will not be my first one." "No, but you got this one saving your herd with me. That makes it different." His eyes met hers, dark and serious in the lamplight. "Does it? I think so." She bandaged the cut. "There. You will live." His next question was quiet. "Will I?" It was not about the cut. Clara could not seem to move. "Ethan, I have been lying to myself," he said, his voice low. "For 3 long years, telling myself I did not miss you, that I did not think about you. And now you are standing right here, covered in mud, and all I can think about is how much I still need you." He stopped, his voice thick with emotion. "This is a terrible idea." "What is?" "All of it. Us working together, feeling things I thought were long buried." His hands found her waist, settling there as if they had a mind of their own. "You could still lose everything all over again." "You could," Clara agreed, her own hands resting on his shoulders. "Or you could let yourself be happy. You could let yourself hope. You could stop just surviving and actually start living. I am not sure I remember how. Then I will teach you again." She leaned in, their foreheads touching. "The same way you taught me how to ride. The same way you taught me what it felt like to really be seen. Clara." Her name was both a plea and a warning. "I love you." The words were quiet but steady, a truth she had held on to for 8 years. "I have loved you since I was 15 years old. I loved you when I had to leave, and I loved you every single day I was away. And I love you right now. I know you are scared. But I need you to know that no matter what happens, that part will not change." Ethan's hands tightened, pulling her closer. "You cannot know that for sure. I do know it. The same way I know the sun will come up tomorrow. If you cannot say it back yet, that is all right. You take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." He pulled her onto his lap and just held on, like she was his only anchor in a storm. Clara buried her face in his neck and felt the tightly wound control he always had finally snap. "I am so tired," he whispered into her hair, "so tired of trying to be strong by myself." "I know," she whispered back. "I know. Then stop. Stop being alone. But what if I need you and you leave again?" She held him tighter. "What if you need me and I stay?" They sat like that for a long time, while the rain on the roof softened to a gentle beat. Outside, the thirsty valley was finally getting the water it needed. Inside, 2 people were remembering how to be close. After a while, Ethan pulled back. His eyes were tired, but a little glimmer of hope was there. "I should go," he said. "I need to check on the rest of the animals." "You could stay." Clara said it softly, not wanting to push. "I have some dry clothes that might fit you. We could make some coffee." "If I stay," he said, "I am not going to want to leave in the morning." "Would that really be so bad?" "Yes. Because I need to do this the right way, Clara. You deserve more than me just grabbing for comfort because I am lonely." She understood. He needed to trust this, to trust himself before he could give in completely. "Okay," she said. "But Ethan, do not be so careful that you forget how to feel altogether." "I will not." He stood up, lifting her with him, and set her gently on her feet. At the door he turned back. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow. I will bring over some wire for that fence. And maybe some of my mother's old quilts if you want them. This house gets mighty cold. I would like that very much." He nodded, put his soaked hat back on his head, and disappeared into the night. Clara watched him ride away, her heart feeling a perfect mix of happy and sad. She closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the last of the rain. Tomorrow, she would be sore. Tomorrow, there would be more work than 2 people could handle. But tonight, he had said he was glad she was back. Tonight, she had told him she loved him. And the world did not fall apart. In fact, for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was finally coming together. I came back inside, too worn out to even drink the coffee I made. Lying in bed, I listened to the storm move on. Looking out the window, I could not see a thing but dark, wet country. But right here, In this little house with its leaky roof and busted barn, I felt something I had not felt in 8 long years. I felt like I was home, and I realized home was not a place. It was the sound of a man's voice saying my name. It was the blessing of rain after a long drought. It was deciding to stay when it would be so much easier to leave. It was a truth spoken in the dark, honest and real. I finally let sleep take me, and I dreamed of mended fences and a valley that was learning how to be green again. The morning came soft and quiet. I woke to sunlight and the sweet smell of wet earth. Every muscle in my body ached, but it was worth it, every single ache. Outside, the world was washed clean. The creek was singing, carrying the gift of the mountains down to the thirsty valley. I was making coffee when Ethan pulled up in a wagon loaded down with fencing wire, tools, and all sorts of supplies. He climbed down slow, favoring one side. "You look awful," I said from the porch. "Good morning to you, too," he said, but he was smiling. "I brought that wire, and a few other things." "You raid your whole house?" "Just the parts I was not using. We carried it all inside. Quilts, a better lamp, a heavy iron skillet, flour, coffee, and beans." "Ethan, this is just too much. It is not a gift. It is an investment." He set down the last sack and looked me in the eye. "If we are going to be partners, I cannot have you freezing to death. This is an investment, among other things." He looked around the little house at the swept floor and the things I had put in order. "Your things in place. You have been busy. I could not sleep after you left. Too much energy from the storm, I suppose. Or from almost getting run down by your herd. That too." Clara poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him. "How are the cattle?" "I lost 3 head. Found them in the creek this morning." His voice was flat, but she heard the pain behind it. "It could have been worse. It would have been, if not for you." "I am so sorry, Ethan. That is just life in the valley. You lose some." He looked out the window at the wet land. "But we saved the rest of them. That has to count for something." They spent the morning stringing wire. The work felt easier when it was shared. The sun climbed, and steam began to rise from the damp earth. By noon, they had finished another long stretch of fence, but Clara's hands were bleeding through her bandages. Ethan saw her flinch and gently took her wrists, his brow furrowed with concern. "We are done for the day," he said, "but we are not finished. Your hands are. You keep on like this, you will do some real damage." He started gathering the tools. "Besides, I have to ride into town. The bank sent word about my loan payment." Something in his tone made Clara's stomach clench. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough." Ethan stared out at the horizon. "I have got until the end of September to pay up or they will start foreclosure. That is only 6 weeks." "I know. Do you have the money?" "Not all of it. But I will get it." He said it with a confidence that his tense shoulders betrayed. "I am selling off some equipment. If the cattle prices are good this fall, I will make up the rest. And if they are not good, then I will figure something else out. I always do." He finally met her eyes, his face a careful, neutral mask. "Do not you worry about it, Clara. This is not your problem. We are partners, remember? Your problems are my problems. This is different. This is debt from long before you came back. You do not owe me a thing." "Maybe not. But I am offering to help." Clara moved closer, close enough to see the fear he was trying so hard to hide. "How much do you need?" "Ethan, how much?" $300. The number felt huge, impossible. Clara's entire savings from 8 years of teaching was barely a third of that. But the thought of Ethan losing this ranch, losing the last piece of his family. "I have some money," she said softly. "It is not enough, but it is something." "Number." The word was sharp, almost angry. "Absolutely not. Why?" "Because you handed me half your pantry. Those were supplies I wasn't even using. This is different. This is me asking for your life savings to pay a debt that isn't yours. It could be ours if we—" Her words got stuck in her throat. "If we officially joined forces." Ethan stood there as still as a statue. What are you getting at? I am saying we could combine the properties. We could pool our resources, share the debt, share the work, and split whatever profit we can scratch together. Clara's heart was pounding, but she kept going. My water rights and your cattle and equipment. It is all honest work. This makes a heck of a lot more sense than both of us struggling alone. You are describing marriage. Am I? To me, it just sounds like a business deal. Clara, he said her name like a warning. Do not. Do not what? Do not offer a sensible solution to our problems? Do not suggest we make this partnership of ours official? Do not make this about business when we both know it ain't. His hands came up and framed her face. They were gentle, even with his calloused palms. If we do this, if we put it all together, I need it to be for real. Not some deal, not for convenience. Real. What on earth makes you think it would not be? Because last night you told me you loved me, and I couldn't say it back. Because I am still learning to trust this thing between us. I am still figuring out how to hope for something good without expecting it all to fall apart. I do not want you tied to me because you feel obligated or out of pity, or some foolish notion that you need to save me. Clara reached up, her hands covering his. You must think mighty highly of yourself if you believe I would marry you out of pity. That is not what I meant. I offered a business partnership because you are too dadgum stubborn to take help any other way. But if you want real, Ethan, then let us be real. She pulled his hands down but kept holding them. I love you. I have loved you for so long that I can't even remember what it felt like not to. And yes, combining our ranches makes good sense. But I am not offering because of the land or the debt. I am offering because I want to build a life with you. Something that lasts. Something that is not just about surviving, but about making a life worth living. And if we lose the ranch anyway, well, we lose it together. Then we figure out what is next, together. That is what partners do. Ethan pulled her in close, his forehead resting against hers. He was breathing hard like he had just run a country mile. I do not deserve you. Probably not, but you are stuck with me now. Clara, He stopped and swallowed hard. I am no good at this, at saying what I feel. But you need to know, you are not just convenient. You are not a solution, you are... I know, she said, real soft. You do not have to say it. I want to. I just do not know if I remember how. Then show me. He kissed her then. It was a soft, careful kiss, full of all the things he just could not put into words. And when Clara kissed him back, she felt 8 years of being apart just melt away into nothing. She felt like the girl she was, and the woman she had become were finally one whole person. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing heavy, Ethan let out a quiet laugh. What? Clara asked. We are doing this all backward. We are supposed to get our own lives sorted out first, then think about putting them together. Since when have we ever done things the normal way? Fair point. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. I need to ride into town. I have to talk to the bank, see if they will give me an extension. You want to come? I ought to stay here, work on the house, maybe start clearing the mess from the barn. Do not lift anything heavy. Your hands need to heal. Yes, ma'am. I am serious, Clara. I know you are. I will be careful. She walked with him to his wagon and watched him climb up. Ethan? Yeah. Whatever the bank says, we will figure it out. He looked down at her, and his eyes were soft and a little scared. When did you get so sure about everything? The day I stopped running and stood still long enough to see what I was running from. She gave him a little smile. Go on, handle your business. I will be right here when you get back. After he left, Clara spent the afternoon working carefully. She cleared the last of the debris from the house and patched a hole in the roof with some materials from the barn. She arranged her few belongings until the place started to look like a home. It was physical work that did not need a strong grip, and it let her mind wander. She was hauling water from the creek when Samuel Miller rode up on his horse looking worried. Miss Clara, he called out, you got a minute? Of course. Is something wrong? Maybe, maybe not. Samuel pulled a letter out of his coat. "This came on yesterday's stage. I was going to give it to you next time you were in town, but I wanted to check on you after the storm." Clara took the envelope. She knew that handwriting right away. It was from her aunt's lawyer up in Denver. She opened it, read it fast, and felt the whole world shift under her feet. "What is it?" Samuel asked. "My aunt." Clara's voice sounded hollow. "She did not just leave me the property, she left me a life insurance policy. $3,000. Samuel let out a low whistle. "That is a whole lot of money. I never knew." The lawyer never said a word. She read the letter again. The money was in a different bank. "It took them this long to find her and process it all." "Well, that is good news, ain't it? It means you can fix this place up right." "Yes, it is very good news, but Clara was thinking about Ethan. He was in town right now, begging the bank for just $300 to save his ranch. She thought about their talk that morning, about partnerships and building something together. Samuel, I need you to do me a favor. Name it. I need you to ride into town and find Ethan Cole. Tell him not to sign anything with the bank until he talks to me. Can you do that?" Samuel looked at her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slow. "I can do that." "You want me to tell him why?" "No. Just tell him it is urgent and to come back here before he does something he cannot take back." "All right, then." Samuel got back on his horse, but he paused. "Clara, whatever you are planning, you be sure it is what you truly want, not just what you think you ought to do." "I will. Thank you, Samuel." He rode off, and Clara just stood there holding the letter, watching new storm clouds building up in the west. The valley was already turning green from yesterday's rain. Out here, things changed in the blink of an eye. Drought could kill you, and rain could bring you back to life. Love could die from being ignored or blossom from just being close. Everything was balanced on a knife's edge. Your only choice was to fight for what mattered or just let it all go. Clara went back inside and sat down with the letter. $3,000, more money than she had ever seen. Enough to fix the barn right, buy some cattle, and put in a good water system. She could even hire help for the work she could not do alone. Or she could save the man she loved from losing everything he had. The choice should have been harder than it was. It should have taken some serious thought. But Clara realized something right then, sitting in her aunt's house. Some choices are only hard if you do not know who you are. And she knew exactly who she was. She was a woman who had spent 8 years learning that running from love does not keep you safe. It just makes you lonely. She was a woman who understood that you can always make more money, but you cannot ever get back lost time. She was Clara Whitfield, and she had come home to this valley for the life she had left behind 8 years ago. She heard the horses before she saw them. 2 riders coming fast. It was Ethan and Samuel. Samuel split off toward his own place, but Ethan rode straight to her door. He was off his horse before it even stopped, walking toward her with a look on his face caught somewhere between hope and fear. Samuel said it was urgent. "It is." Clara held up the letter. "My aunt left me money. A lot of money." Ethan stopped dead in his tracks. "How much?" $3,000. She watched him take that in. She saw him doing the math in his head. She watched him figure out exactly what she was about to say next. "No," he said. "You have not even heard my offer. I do not need to. The answer is no." "Ethan, I am not taking your money. Is your inheritance, Clara. I'm not about to let you use your aunt's legacy to pay for my family's mistakes. It is not a mistake if I am offering, and it is our debt now that we are partners. We are not married yet. We are not bound by law. That money is yours. Then let's fix that." The words were out before she could stop them, but she meant everyone. "Marry me, Ethan. Today, ride into town, get the preacher, and let's make this official." He just stared at her, like she had started speaking another language. "You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. We love each other. We work good together. We are stronger as a team than we are apart. So why should we wait? Because this is crazy. Because folks do not just get married on a Tuesday afternoon over a banknote. Because, because you're scared, Clara finished for him. Because if we make this real, if we tie the knot for good, you cannot keep me at arm's length anymore. You cannot keep one foot out the door in case I decide to leave again. That is not fair. It is perfectly fair. You have been holding back since the day I returned, Ethan. Terrified I'm going to hurt you again. And I get it. But you need to understand, I am not asking you to marry me because of the money. I am asking because I want to build a life with you. The money just means we get to start today. Ethan turned away from her, his boots heavy on the porch boards. This is just crazy. We have only been back in each other's lives for a handful of days. Clara, we have known each other since we were kids. We just had 8 years get in the way. If we are going to do this, I need you to be absolutely certain, not just caught up in all this trouble. Clara walked right up to him, her bandaged hands gently holding his face. She made him look her in the eye. I have never been more sure of anything. I love you, Ethan. I want to be your wife. I want to build a life with you. And yes, this is all happening fast because of the bank and my inheritance. But this feeling is not new. This feeling is 8 years old, and it has been waiting right here for me to come home. That is what a marriage is, Ethan. It is not about finding somebody who is perfect. It is about finding somebody worth the fight and then doing the work. He squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them, they were shining with tears. I love you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I have loved you since I was 15 years old, and I never stopped. I love you, and I'm scared to death of losing you. You do not do it without the fear. You do it in spite of the fear, she whispered and kissed him. Say yes. Let yourself be happy. Yes. The word was just a breath. Then, a little stronger, he said, yes. Let's get married. She started laughing and crying all at once. Ethan swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before setting her down for a proper kiss, one that was full of promises for the future. I will ride to town and get the preacher, he said. It is late, Clara said gently. Why not wait until morning? Give yourself the night to be sure. I thought you were the one who was sure. I am. But I want you to be sure, too. I do not want you waking up with regrets. Ethan looked at her, his hands framing her face. I'm not going to regret this. The only thing I regret is all the time we lost. Then let's not waste another minute. Stay with me tonight. We can ride into town together tomorrow and take care of everything. The wedding, the bank, all of it. If I stay, people are going to talk. Let them talk. We will be married by this time tomorrow. He thought about it. Then a real wide smile spread across his face. Your reputation will be in tatters. My reputation was the last thing on my mind when I moved back here. Besides, I am marrying the rancher who saved me from a stampede. I think folks will understand. I did not save you. You saved me. Then I suppose we are even. They spent that evening making plans, mixing romance with common sense. Clara showed him the lawyer's letter, and they figured out how to use the money. There was enough for the bank payment, plus some left over for repairs, new livestock, and maybe some hired help. They argued good-naturedly over what to do first, finding out they made a good team. As the sun went down, Ethan stoked the fire while Clara cooked up some beans and cornbread. They ate sitting close on the bed, sharing the single fork she owned. We need to buy some household things, Ethan said. You cannot run a home with just one fork. I have 2 cups, she teased. Oh, my mistake. Then you are all set. She nudged him with her shoulder. I was not planning on having a husband move in so soon. I'm not moving in just yet. But it makes sense for us to pick one house to live in. Yours is closer to the water. Mine has a better barn. Ethan pulled her closer. We will figure it out. We have time now. Do we? 6 weeks ago, you were about to lose this ranch. 6 weeks ago, I was all alone. Now, I am not. He kissed the side of her head. That changes things. They talked deep into the night, getting to know each other all over again. Clara learned Ethan still took his coffee black and had a faint scar on his left hand from mending a fence when he was 17. Ethan learned Clara loved to read and was quicker with numbers than most men. When they finally got tired, Ethan made a bed for himself on the floor. Tomorrow, he said firmly when she protested, after we are married. I am going to do this the right way. You are being silly. I am being respectful. I do not want you to be respectful. I want you to be warm. Clara, he said, and lifted her hand to his lips. Let me do this one thing right. Let me marry you first. She gave in, and they settled down in the quiet dark, close enough to hear each other breathe. Ethan, Clara said into the darkness. Yeah? I'm glad you came back that first morning. Me too. There was a pause. Clara? She heard him ask. Yeah? I am scared clean out of my mind. I know, she said softly. Me too. But I am doing it anyway. I know that too. Clara smiled in the dark. That is how you know it is important. If it did not scare you some, it would not be worth doing. That is some terrible logic. It is perfect logic. We are going to argue about everything, are we not? Probably. Is that a problem for you? No. She could hear the smile in his voice. I think I might enjoy it. They fell asleep like that, in two separate beds, but together in every way that mattered. Tomorrow they would ride to town. Tomorrow they would face the bank and the preacher and start building a life. But tonight, in a little house that was starting to feel like a home, they just rested. And that was enough. Dawn came soft and golden, and Clara woke to the smell of coffee. She sat up and saw Ethan already moving about, the morning light spilling in like a kept promise. Clara found Ethan by the stove, looking like he'd slept in his clothes, with hair going every which way. She almost had to laugh. You are up with the chickens, she said. He shook his head. Could not get my eyes to stay shut. He poured them both a cup of coffee and handed one over. My mind just kept churning over what all has to get done today. Starting to have second thoughts. Not a one, he said, quick and sure. Just the usual jitters a man gets before he marries his bride, pays off the bank with her money, and turns his whole life upside down all before lunch. Clara cradled the warm cup. Well, when you say it like that, it does sound like a handful. It is, but I am doing it. Ethan sat on the bed beside her, their shoulders brushing. How are those hands of yours? She flexed her fingers. They are still sore and stiff, but getting better. They will heal up. Let me take a look. He took her cup and gently unwrapped the bandages, frowning at the blisters. These need a proper look-see from Doc Morrison. We will stop by his office after the bank. You mean after we are husband and wife? He tested the words out. After we are married? A small, wondrous smile touched his lips. We are getting married today. We sure are. Unless you changed your mind, not a chance in this world. Ethan wrapped her hands back up, his fingers gentle and sure. But I want to do this proper, Clara. I want you in a real dress, not just something you packed in a trunk. Clara put her hand on his cheek, making him meet her eyes. I just need you. I need you to say the words and mean them deep in your heart. Everything else is just window dressing. You deserve the window dressing. I deserve a true partner. I deserve a man who is not afraid to fight for what we are building together. She kissed him, soft and slow. You have already given me all that. A fancy dress does not make it any more real. Ethan pulled her in close, their foreheads touching. I love you. I know I said it last night, but I had to say it again in the clear light of day when we are both sober and certain. I love you too. Always have, always will. He chuckled. That is a lot of love. I used to be a teacher. I know my way around words. Former teacher, she corrected with a smile. Current rancher's wife. Now that is going to take some getting used to. We have got the rest of our lives for that. They got ready, Clara putting on her best dress, a simple but clean thing. Ethan put on a fresh shirt, and they looked as presentable as two folks could after a week of working in dirt and rain. Before leaving, Clara put the lawyer's letter in her bag, and Ethan gathered his papers, the ranch deed and the bank's notice, proof of everything he was about to put on the line for a future built on hope. The ride into town was quiet, both of them lost in thought. The valley was greener after the storm, like it could finally breathe again. Creeks ran full, and the sound of water followed them down the road. They tipped their hats to other ranchers, and Clara saw the curious looks they got. News travels like wildfire in a small town, and she reckoned by sundown the whole valley would know their business. Let 'em talk. She had stopped worrying about opinions the day she decided to make her life here. The bank was a sturdy brick building that looked both permanent and disapproving. Ethan tied the horses and helped her down. She could feel the worry coming off him like heat. "We can go to the church first, you know," she said softly. "Number one, I want this done. I want to stand before that preacher knowing I'm not bringing you into a pile of debt. Ethan, that debt is there whether we say our vows before or after we pay it. I know, but this is something I have to do. I need to walk in there and clean up my own mess before I ask you to be a part of it." He squeezed her hand. "Let me do this my way." Clara nodded. She understood. Some things are about a man's pride. For a man who had held on by a thread for 3 long years, walking into that bank with his future wife's inheritance was a hard thing to swallow. This was a dignity she could give him. The bank manager was a skinny fella named Garrett, with glasses perched on his nose and a look that said he had never done a day of hard labor. He looked up as they came in, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Mr. Cole, I did not figure on seeing you till the end of the week. Plans changed," Ethan said, taking off his hat. "I am here to settle my account." "I see. And you have the full amount?" "I will in about 15 minutes. First, I need to make a withdrawal." He looked at Clara. "This is Clara Whitfield. Her aunt left her an insurance policy that was sent here." Garrett's eyebrows went up. "Miss Whitfield?" "Yes, the funds arrived 2 days ago. $3,000 minus some fees. The account is yours." "I would like to take out $350, Clara said, her voice steady. "And I want it put directly toward Mr. Cole's loan." "Ma'am, that is a whole heap of money. Are you certain?" "I am certain. Mr. Cole and I are combining our properties. This is an investment in our future together." Garrett looked from one to the other, his mind clearly working, trying to make sense of it all. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "All right. I will need you both to sign the transfer forms. And Mr. Cole, you will need to sign the loan settlement." He started pulling out papers, his movements sharp and precise. "This will take a few minutes." They waited as his pen scratched across the pages. Under the desk, Ethan found her hand and squeezed it hard. This was it. The moment his family's land was safe. "Mr. Cole, sign here. Initial here. Miss Whitfield, your signature here." Clara signed her name, her hand steady. Ethan shook just a little when he signed, a small tremor that told her how much this was costing his pride, even as it was saving his home. Garrett stamped the papers and pushed a receipt across the desk. "The loan is paid in full, Mr. Cole. The ranch is clear." "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's go, Clara." Outside in the sunshine, Ethan leaned against the post and just closed his eyes for a long moment. Clara stood beside him, giving him his space. "I just bet my whole life on us," he said, his voice low. "You did that days ago when you brought me fence wire," she told him. "This just makes it official. This is me admitting I cannot do it all by myself, that I need you." He opened his eyes and looked right at her. "And that is harder than it ought to be." "I know, but you did it." Clara took his hand. "Now let's go get married before you get to thinking on it too much." The church was a small white building with a steeple pointing to a clear blue sky. Reverend Hayes, a kind man in his 60s, was in his office. "Ethan Cole," the Reverend smiled. "It has been a while. Been busy trying not to lose the ranch, Reverend, so I have heard. And you must be Clara Whitfield." He shook her hand. "Welcome home." "Thank you, sir." "Reverend," she said, "we came here hoping we could get married. If at all possible, today." The Reverend's eyebrows shot up. "Today?" "This is all happening mighty fast," Ethan said. "We've known each other since we were kids." "The timing might be quick," Clara replied, "but the feeling is old." Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Well now, tying the knot is a serious business. I generally like to sit with a couple a few times to make sure they're ready. We are ready, Clara said firmly. We're committing to building a life, to being honest partners who fight for each other. We are combining two struggling ranches into one that has a fighting chance. And we are choosing to love each other enough to take this terrifying leap. Hayes looked from her face to Ethan's. Those are some very specific promises. We've had some very specific troubles, Ethan answered. Reverend, I know this seems rushed, but I have loved this woman since I was 15 years old. I lost her once to things we couldn't control. I am not about to lose her again because I was too afraid to step up. And you, Clara, you feel the same? I do. I left this valley 8 years ago and regretted every single day. I came back home because this is where I belong. He is where I belong. She met Ethan's eyes. We aren't asking for a big to-do. We're just asking you to make it official. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he broke into a warm smile. All right, I will marry you today. But I need you both to understand one thing. Getting married will not solve your problems. It will not end the drought or make the cattle prices go up. All it means is that you get to face all of that together, instead of on your own. That is all we are asking for, Ethan said, the chance to face it all together. Then let us get you married, Hayes said, standing up. Do you have any witnesses? No, Clara admitted. We did not plan that far ahead. I will find some folks. Give me 15 minutes. Hayes walked to the door and paused. Are you both absolutely sure about this? Completely sure, they said at the exact same time, and Hayes let out a laugh. Well, that is a good start anyway. He left them in the quiet office. The size of what they were doing settled over Clara, feeling like both a heavy weight and a great relief. In 15 minutes, her life would be legally tied to Ethan's in a land that promised nothing. You okay? Ethan asked her softly. I am terrified, happy, and more certain than I have ever been about anything. He pulled her close into his arms. All of it at once. That sounds about right, he whispered. They stood that way until they heard voices from the main church. Hayes was back with Samuel Miller and his wife, Margaret. And to Clara's surprise, Doc Morrison and his wife, Ruth, were with them. These were the people who had known them as children, who had watched them grow. They had seen Clara leave and seen Ethan struggle. Now they would witness them build something new. The ceremony was as simple as could be. There was no music and no flowers, just the warm afternoon light pouring through the plain glass windows. Hayes spoke the old familiar words, but when they came from Clara and Ethan, they sounded brand new. After the traditional questions came the traditional answers. But then Ethan, holding both of Clara's hands, asked if they could say a little something from the heart. He looked right at her and said, I don't have a speech prepared. But Clara, for 8 long years, I tried my level best to forget you. I told myself I was better off alone, that love was just a fool's game, and I was dead wrong. His voice hitched just a bit. You came back and reminded me what it feels like to hope for something more than just making it to the next sunrise. I can't promise it'll be easy. I can promise I'll still be a stubborn mule sometimes, but I swear I will fight for us every single day. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. I don't have a speech either. But Ethan, you showed me what love was before I even had a name for it. You made me feel seen. And when I left, I learned just how much it costs to walk away from that. I'm not walking away ever again. Come drought or flood, good times or bad, I am staying. I choose you. I choose us. Hayes pronounced them husband and wife, and Ethan kissed her like the whole world had faded away. As they parted, Clara saw Margaret dabbing her eyes, and Samuel grinning from ear to ear, and her heart felt like it might burst with pure joy. After signing the marriage certificate, Hayes handed them the official copy with a knowing smile. Well, now the real work begins. Clara squeezed Ethan's hand. I reckon we'll be just fine. Outside, the little group stood in the warm sunshine. Doc Morrison clucked over Clara's blistered hands. pressing a tin of salve into them. Margaret gave them both a tight hug and made them promise to come for supper soon. Samuel shook Ethan's hand, his voice low. "It's about time you let yourself have something good, friend." They rode back toward the ranch, their ranch now. The afternoon sun felt good on Clara's shoulders, and Ethan's hand found hers. "We're married," he said, like he was tasting the word for the first time. "We are. Got any regrets yet?" "Not a single one." He looked over at her, his smile wider and more real than she had seen it since her return. "Just trying to believe it's real." "It's real. I've got the paper to prove it." "Show me when we get home," he said. Our home," Clara corrected gently. Ethan said it slow, savoring the sound. "Our home. That'll take some getting used to." They stopped at his place first to check the cattle and pack up his necessities. His house was bigger and in better shape than hers, but it felt hollow, like a place where a man was just surviving, not living. There were no personal touches, just a place to eat and sleep. "We can make this the main house if you want," Clara offered, seeing its solid bones. "It's bigger. But your place has the better water, and it's closer to town." "Makes more sense for the long haul," Ethan said, already packing a bag. "Besides, your place already feels like a home. This has just been a roof over my head. Then we'll make it our home together." They loaded his things onto the wagon, clothes, his few books, and his mother's wedding quilt, which he'd kept packed away. As they left, Ethan paused in the doorway and looked back. "I spent 3 years in there telling myself I was fine on my own," he said softly. 3 years building walls around my heart and calling it strength. He shut the door for the last time. "Let's go home." Their house welcomed them as the sun dipped low. They found places for his things among hers, 2 lives starting to weave together. His books went on her shelf, his razor next to her wash basin. His boots stood by the door right next to hers. "I'll need to come back tomorrow and start moving the big equipment," Ethan said, looking around the small cabin. "We will do it together," Clara reminded him. "You don't have to carry the whole load by yourself anymore." "I keep forgetting I'm allowed to share it now." "Well, I'll keep reminding you." They tried to cook supper together, bumping into each other in the small kitchen. Ethan burned the cornbread because Clara stole a kiss and distracted him. She put too much salt in the beans because his hand on her waist made her forget what she was doing. They ate it all anyway, laughing at the mess they'd made. Later, Ethan built up the fire while she changed. When she came out, he was sitting on their bed, and the look on his face took her breath away. "Come here," he whispered. He pulled her close, his touch so gentle like she was something precious. She kissed him, and it felt like 8 years of loneliness and longing were finally coming to an end. "I love you, Clara," he whispered against her lips. "So much it scares me half to death." "Then let's be scared together," she whispered back, "and do it anyway." Their love was slow and careful, a quiet discovery of each other after so much time apart. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the sound of the creek drifting through the open window. Clara felt a peace she hadn't known in 8 years. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, his hand stroking her arm. "That I'm finally home," she said. "Truly home." "Is it what you thought it would be?" "It's better, because you're here." She turned in the moonlight to look at him. "What are you thinking?" "That I spent 3 years being only half alive and forgot what it felt like to be whole," he said, pulling her closer. "And that tomorrow we've got about 1,000 chores to do. Tomorrow we'll face them together. But tonight," she said, "let's just be." "I can do that," he said, kissing her forehead. "I can definitely do that." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and Clara dreamed of a valley that was turning green and staying green. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of hard work. They officially combined the ranches, merging their herds and their hopes into a single operation that just might have a fighting chance. The valley folk watched with curiosity. Tying 2 struggling ranches together didn't always make a strong one. But Clara and Ethan worked with a fire that comes from having everything to lose. Slowly, things began to change for the better. The one good rain had broken the worst of the drought, and patches of new grass offered some relief. The creek ran steady, providing enough water for the house and the herd. It wasn't wealth, but it was a real possibility, and that was more than either of them had started with. They found a rhythm working together. Clara's knack for planning brought order to the chaos. Ethan's deep knowledge of the land and his sheer strength meant they could tackle jobs Clara never could have done alone. They were stronger together, and they both knew it. It wasn't all perfect, of course. They argued over whether to buy new breeding stock or fix the old barn first. They argued over his frontier ways versus her more modern ideas. But they were the arguments of partners, two stubborn people building one future, and they always found their way back to each other by the end of the day. They had learned how to have disagreements, how to truly listen, and how to find a path that worked for both of them. Each argument ended with the same understanding. They were on the same team, just looking at the problem from a different direction. 6 weeks after they got married, they rode into town for the big fall cattle sale. This was the moment of truth. It would decide if their risky venture was going to pay off. Ethan had picked their strongest cattle, the ones that had survived the dry spell and looked good after the recent rains. Clara had studied the market and worked out a plan for dealing with the buyers. The sale was a bustling scene, with ranchers from all over hoping for a good price to get them through the winter. When Ethan's cattle entered the ring, Clara could hardly breathe. The bidding started, and the prices climbed higher than they had hoped. It was not enough to make them wealthy, but it was enough to cover their bills and have a little left over. When the auctioneer's hammer fell for the last time, Ethan looked at Clara with pure relief. "We did it," he said softly. "Yes, we did," Clara replied, her eyes filling with tears. This was more than just a good sale. It was proof that their partnership was working. That night they treated themselves to dinner at the town's hotel restaurant, a small luxury they had not enjoyed since their wedding. Samuel and Margaret came along, and even Doc Morrison came by their table to congratulate them. It felt like the whole valley was finally admitting that maybe, just maybe, these two had figured out how to make things work against all odds. On the ride home beneath a sky full of stars, Clara rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked. "That we ought to celebrate more. That happiness is something you have to choose to practice." He kissed the top of her head. "I agree. What else?" "That I want to have children one day. Not right now, but someday." She felt him stiffen just a bit, so she quickly added, "I know it is a big thing to talk about, but I wanted you to know I am thinking about a future beyond just getting through the next season." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think about that too. I wonder what our children would be like." He was smiling in the dark. "Thank you, Clara. Thank you for coming back and for not giving up on me." "And thank you for letting me in," she said. The seasons changed. Fall brought cooler air and the hard work of preparing for winter. They cut hay, stockpiled wood, and made repairs around the ranch. They even hired a young man named Thomas to help out, and he turned out to be a hard worker and a fast learner. Winter arrived with a blanket of snow in early November, and the ranch settled into a quieter routine. Ethan showed Clara how to care for the livestock in the cold, and she showed him how to keep proper financial records, so they always knew where they stood. They spent long nights by the fireplace. He would mend leather harnesses while she read to him from one of her books. The house finally started to feel like a real home. On their 3-month anniversary, Ethan surprised Clara with a simple silver ring he had the blacksmith make, with their initials carved inside. She started crying, and he looked worried until she told him they were happy tears, the kind that come from feeling truly cared for. Spring finally returned, melting the snow and turning the valley a vibrant green. It was a beautiful sight after so many years of drought. Clara planted a big garden with vegetables and flowers, and Ethan built a sturdy fence around it to protect it from deer. With the money they had saved, they bought some young cattle to grow their herd. Then, one morning in early May, Clara woke up feeling sick to her stomach. She realized with a rush of both fear and excitement that she was late. A week later, her hands were trembling as she told Ethan the news at the breakfast table. His coffee cup slipped right out of his hand and shattered on the wooden floor. Neither of them moved. He just stared at her, his face a whirlwind of shock, then fear, then wonder, and finally, a powerful joy. "Are you sure?" he finally managed to ask. "As sure as I can be without the doc telling me so." He stood up, walked over to her, and pulled her into a tight hug. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," she whispered. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I am terrified. I am thrilled. I am already wondering if I will be a good father." He pulled back to look at her. "Yes, Clara, I am happy. Are you?" "All of that," she said, "plus I am worried about everything." He kissed her gently. "We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." And a week later, Doc Morrison confirmed it was all true. No trouble at all continuing her work through most of the pregnancy. The whole valley tipped their hats to them, full of genuine warmth. The women folk offered up good advice and baby clothes their own had outgrown. The men clapped Ethan on the back, joking about the sleepless nights that were coming for him. Clara kept at it all through the summer, her body changing, but her spirit staying strong as ever. She and Ethan brought on Thomas for good, paying him a decent wage to handle the heavy lifting Clara couldn't do anymore. The ranch just blossomed under their care. In late October, on a crisp morning when the cottonwoods had turned a brilliant gold, Clara's time came. Ethan rode like the wind for Doc Morrison, while Margaret Miller stayed right by Clara's side. She coached her through it all, telling her she was doing just fine. Ethan got back with the doctor just in time to hold his wife's hand for the final moments. When their daughter was born, healthy and with a strong set of lungs, he just broke down and cried. "What should we name her?" Clara asked, worn out but overjoyed. Ethan looked at his wife and his new baby girl, this family he never thought he'd have, and said softly, "Hope. Let's call her Hope Cole." The years that came next weren't always easy because ranching never is. But they were good years, full years. Years where Clara and Ethan built something that would last, not because it was simple, but because they put up a fight for it, side by side. Their little ranch grew from just getting by to being modestly prosperous. Hope grew into a smart, determined little girl with her mother's cleverness and her father's quiet strength. When she was 3, they gave her a brother named James. When she was 6, a little sister named Rose came along. The house got bigger right along with the family, adding a room here and there as they could afford it. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan and Clara stood on their porch, watching their children play out in the yard. The ranch spread out before them, green and thriving. The drought was just a story they told the kids now, a tale about hard times that made the good times feel even sweeter. "You ever regret coming back here?" Ethan asked, his arm wrapped around her waist. "Not for a second," she said. "Not even on the toughest days." She leaned against him. "Do you regret saying yes when I asked you to marry me just to save my hide from the bank?" "That was the best decision I ever made," he said. "Even if we were both crazy at the time. We've built a good life here." "We sure have," she agreed. He looked out at it all, the land, the kids, his wife. "It's better than anything I ever imagined, especially after you stepped off that stagecoach looking like you were fixing to save a valley that didn't want saving." "I didn't come to save the valley," she said softly. "I came to save myself." "Did you?" he asked. "Yes, by finally planting my feet, by deciding to fight for something instead of always running from it, and by loving you enough to risk it all on the chance you might love me back." "Might?" Ethan chuckled. "Clara, I've loved you since the moment you popped Bobby Miller for pulling your hair when we were 8 years old. I loved you through 8 years of you being gone, and I will love you until my last day." They kissed, and their children made a show of being disgusted before running off laughing. And in that moment, Clara felt the pure rightness of this life, this choice, and this love that refused to give up. Their ranch had learned to thrive. Their family had learned to choose each other day in and day out. Hope was not just a name. It was something that lived and grew right there with them, proving that some things are worth the fight. Some things are worth coming home for. Clara Whitfield. Cole stood on her porch, her husband's arm around her, and the sound of her children's laughter in the air. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that this was what she had been looking for all those years she was running. She wasn't searching for an escape, or safety, or even comfort. She was searching for this, for love, for home. And it was enough. It was more than enough. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.